The silk sheets whispered against her trembling skin as two identical faces loomed above her in the dim candlelight. Kang Minho's hand traced her jawline while his twin brother Kang Sunho mirrored the movement on the other side. "Open your legs," Minho commanded softly, his voice velvet over steel. "We'll make you scream tonight." Mia's breath caught in her throat, caught between terror and something far more dangerous awakening inside her chest, a heat she'd never known, a need she couldn't name, pulling her toward two men who'd purchased her innocence with a contract signed in desperation and sealed with a wedding ring she never wanted to wear. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. 3 weeks earlier, Mia sat in the sterile office of a lawyer she'd never met, watching her father sign away her future with shaking hands. The numbers on the contract blurred before her eyes. $5 million. Enough to save her family's failing business, pay her mother's mounting medical bills, keep her younger siblings in school. All it required was 1 year of her life, married to men she'd never met, bound to a family whose name alone made politicians nervous and criminals retreat. The Kang twins, the lawyer explained, sliding photographs across the mahogany desk. Two men who looked carved from the same dangerous dream stared back at her. Sharp jawlines, intense dark eyes, the kind of beauty that promised ruin. They need a wife for legal reasons related to their inheritance. You need money. The arrangement is mutually beneficial. Beneficial. Such a cold word for selling herself. Mia's hands fisted in her lap, nails cutting crescents into her palms. Her father wouldn't meet her eyes. Coward. But she thought of her mother's labored breathing, her sister's university acceptance letter, her brother's dreams of medical school. Family. Everything always came back to family. 1 year, she whispered. Then I'm free? 1 year, the lawyer confirmed. With certain conditions detailed in the contract. Physical consummation is required for the marriage to be legally binding under Korean inheritance law. Beyond that, your obligations are minimal. Appear at required events, maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage, produce no scandals. Physical consummation. Her stomach twisted. She'd never even been kissed, and now strangers would have legal rights to her body. The thought made bile rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down with the same determination that had carried her through every other impossible thing life had thrown at her. She signed. The pen felt heavy as lead, each stroke of her name another link in invisible chains. The wedding happened 3 days later in a private ceremony that felt more like a funeral. Mia wore white because that's what brides wore, though she felt like a sacrifice dressed for slaughter. The twins stood at the altar in matching black suits, impossible to tell apart except for the small scar on Minho's left eyebrow. They didn't smile when she walked down the aisle alone. No family came to witness her vows. This wasn't that kind of marriage. Do you, Mia Johnson, take these men to be your lawfully wedded husbands? The officiant's voice echoed in the empty chapel. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. But she thought of her mother's next treatment cycle, of opportunities her siblings deserved, of the weight of responsibility she'd carried since she was old enough to understand her family was drowning. So she did what she always did. She endured. I do. The reception was held at the twins' estate, a sprawling mansion that spoke of old money and older power. Staff moved through rooms like ghosts, efficient and silent. Mia felt their eyes on her, curious and pitying. The first black woman to marry into the Kang family. The whispers would be vicious, she knew. Gold digger. Opportunist. Whore. Let them whisper. She'd survived worse than gossip. That first night, she stood in the master bedroom they directed her to, staring at the enormous bed that dominated the space. Her wedding dress felt too tight, corset stays digging into ribs that suddenly couldn't expand enough to draw breath. A knock at the door made her jump. May we come in? Minho's voice, polite but leaving no room for refusal. They entered together, moving with the synchronized grace of men who'd spent a lifetime as mirror images of each other. Minho closed the door softly. Sungho leaned against it, blocking her only exit. Not threatening, just present. Unavoidable. You're afraid, Minho observed, stopping a few feet away. Close enough to touch, but he didn't reach for her. Not yet. Wouldn't you be? Nia's voice came out steadier than she felt. Good. Let them think she was brave even when terror clawed at her throat. Yes, Sung-ho answered softly. In your position, I would be terrified. The admission surprised her enough that she finally looked at him properly. His eyes held something she hadn't expected. Understanding. Maybe even kindness, though that seemed impossible for men who bought brides. We're not going to hurt you, Minho said. Tonight or any night. But the contract requires consummation within the first month for the inheritance clause to activate. We have time. You have time to adjust. To adjust to being owned? The bitterness escaped before she could catch it. To adjust to being protected. Minho stepped closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. You're not property, Nia. You're our wife. There's a difference. Is there? She met his gaze, refusing to be cowed. I was purchased. There was a price negotiated. That makes me property by definition. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe. Or interest. You have fire, he murmured. Good. We'd be disappointed if you were merely docile. Sung-ho pushed off the door, moving to stand beside his brother. The twin effect was dizzying, two versions of the same dangerous beauty surrounding her. The contract stipulates consummation, yes. But it doesn't specify timeline beyond the first month. It doesn't dictate how. We're not monsters, despite what you might believe. Then what are you? Nia demanded. Practical men, Minho answered. With practical needs. Our grandfathers will require us to be married and producing an heir to maintain control of the family business. You provide the solution to our problem. We provide the solution to yours. Everyone benefits. Except I lose a year of my life and my autonomy. Do you? Sung-ho tilted his head, studying her with unsettling intensity. Your family is saved. Your mother receives the best medical care available. Your siblings' futures are secured. What price would you not pay for that? He'd aimed the question like a knife, and it hit true. Nia had no answer because he was right. She'd sell a year, 10 years, her whole life if it meant keeping the people she loved safe and whole. That's what love did. It made you willing to bleed. Get some rest, Minho said gently, turning toward the door. Tomorrow we'll discuss the practical arrangements of this marriage. Separate bedrooms if you prefer. Space when you need it. We're not unreasonable. They left her alone with her thoughts and her fear and the too large bed that whispered promises she didn't want to hear. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. She found a note on the bedside table in elegant handwriting. Breakfast in the garden when you're ready. Take your time. Minho. She dressed carefully, armor of expensive clothes they'd provided. Everything fit perfectly, tailored to her curves with a precision that suggested they'd studied her body before she'd ever set foot in their home. The thought should have disturbed her. Instead, it made her skin flush with something uncomfortably close to pleasure. The garden was an oasis of green in the heart of the city, private and serene. Minho sat at a wrought iron table reading a newspaper, looking like something from a magazine spread. Dangerous beauty domesticated by morning light. He glanced up when she approached, and his smile was warm enough to startle her. You slept well, I hope? Well enough for a woman who just sold herself. He didn't flinch at the words. Instead, he set down his paper and gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. Eat. Then we'll talk about the rules of this arrangement. She sat, not because he commanded but because her legs suddenly felt unsteady. A staff member appeared with a plate of food before she could protest, American breakfast foods mixed with Korean dishes, options catering to tastes she'd never expressed. They'd researched her. Thoroughly. Rule 1, Minho began once she'd taken a few bites. You are free to go anywhere in the house except my office and Sung-Ho's studio. Those spaces are private. Respect that, and we'll respect your privacy in return. I have privacy? Rule 2, he continued as if she hadn't interrupted. You may pursue any activities or hobbies you wish. We have a library, gym, pool. Use them freely. If there's something you want that we don't have, tell us. Rule 3. You will accompany us to necessary social functions. Family dinners, business events, charity galas. At these events, you will play the role of devoted wife. Affection in public is required. But only in public. Nia set down her fork, appetite vanishing. You want me to pretend to love you. We want you to pretend to be happy in this marriage. There's a difference. His eyes held hers, dark and unreadable. Can you do that? For $5 million? I can pretend anything. Good. He leaned back, and she caught the faintest hint of disappointment in his expression before it smoothed away. Rule 4, and this is the most important one. You are under our protection now. That means if anyone threatens you, bothers you, makes you uncomfortable in any way, you tell us immediately. Why would anyone threaten me? Because you're a Kong now. That comes with enemies. His voice went cold, dangerous. There are people who would hurt you to hurt us. We won't allow that. The words should have terrified her. Instead, something warm unfurled in her chest. Protection. When was the last time anyone had protected her? She'd been the protector for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be shielded. And Rule 5, she asked, because there was always another condition. Rule 5 is simple. Don't fall in love with us. He stood, gathering his paper. This is a business arrangement. Feelings complicate things. Keep your heart separate, and the year will pass easily. He left her sitting in the garden, his words echoing in her head. Don't fall in love. As if love was something she could control, something that followed rules and listened to logic. She almost laughed. After everything they'd taken from her, they thought her heart was still hers to give. The following week, they settled into an uneasy routine. She spent her days exploring the massive house, losing herself in the library's extensive collection, swimming laps in the pool until her muscles burned and her mind went quiet. The twins moved through her life like dangerous currents, present but not intrusive. Minho worked from his office, door always closed. Sungho painted in his studio, emerging only for meals. They were polite. Distant. Exactly what she'd expected. Except for the way Minho's hand lingered at the small of her back when they passed in hallways. The way Sungho's eyes tracked her movements when he thought she wasn't looking. Small things. Meaningless things. That made her pulse quicken despite every warning her mind screamed. Friday night brought their first public appearance together, a charity gala for some cause Nia couldn't remember. She stood in front of her closet, staring at the evening gowns that had appeared while she was out, each more stunning than the last. They'd thought of everything. She chose a deep emerald dress that hugged her curves, made her brown skin glow. The twins appeared at her door in matching black tuxedos, and the sight of them stole her breath. Dangerous princes come to collect their prize. You look beautiful, Sungho said softly. Stunning, Minho corrected, offering his arm. Ready? No. She wasn't ready. But she took his arm anyway because that's what she did. She endured. The gala was held in a hotel ballroom that dripped wealth, crystal chandeliers, and designer gowns and the kind of casual displays of money that made her teeth ache. The twins moved through the crowd like sharks, people parting before them with nervous smiles and careful words. Fear. They commanded fear dressed up as respect. Smile, Minho murmured in her ear, his hand warm at her waist. You look like you're facing execution. Isn't that what this is? But she smiled anyway, the expression she'd perfected over years of pretending everything was fine when nothing was. They introduced her as their wife, and she watched curiosity and judgment flash across face after face. The Kong twins had married a curvy black American woman nobody had heard of. The whispers started before they'd made it halfway through the room. Gold digger. Secret baby. Scandal waiting to happen. Let them talk. She'd survived worse than gossip. By the end of the week, exhaustion sat heavy in her bones. Playing happy wife was harder than she'd anticipated, especially when Minho's touch sent shivers down her spine and Sungho's rare smiles made her heart stutter. Don't fall in love, they'd said. But nobody had warned her about falling into something darker. Wanting. Needing. Craving the attention of men who'd bought her like property but treated her like something precious. The following morning, she woke to raised voices down the hall. Male voices, angry and sharp. She followed the sound to Minho's office, where the door stood ajar. She's our wife, not your plaything. Minho's voice, cold enough to cut. I'm well aware of what she is. A stranger's voice, smooth and mocking. Your grandfather would be spinning in his grave if he knew you'd married some foreign girl to get your inheritance. Careful, Sungho warned. You're speaking about our wife. Your convenient wife. Don't pretend this is anything but a business arrangement. The girl's been here 2 weeks and you're already parading her around like she matters. She does matter. Minho's voice dropped to something lethal. And if I hear you or anyone else speak about her with anything less than respect, I'll make you regret it. Now get out. Footsteps approached the door. Nia barely had time to step back before a man emerged, middle-aged and angry. He glanced at her, lip curling with disdain, before stalking past. You heard that. Minho appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. I did. And nothing. I knew what I was getting into. She turned to leave, but his hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. Nia. She looked back, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Not pity. Something fiercer. Protective. You matter, he said quietly. Contract or not, you're under our protection. That means something. Does it? The question came out softer than she'd intended, almost vulnerable. She hated the sound of it. Yes. He released her wrist but didn't step back. More than you know. That evening, Sungho found her in the library, curled in a window seat with a book she wasn't reading. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, close enough that his warmth seeped into her side. They stayed like that for an hour, silent but not alone, and Nia felt something shift. A crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Dangerous. The next few weeks blurred together. More events, more pretending, more moments where the line between performance and reality grew thin. Minho's hand at her back felt natural now. Sungho's smiles came easier. They ate breakfast together, discussed current events, laughed at stupid jokes. Almost like a real family. Except families didn't have 30-day consummation clauses hanging over their heads. The night before the deadline, Nia couldn't sleep. She paced her room, mind spinning. Tomorrow. Tomorrow they would come to her, and she would have to give them the one thing she'd never given anyone. Her body. Her innocence. The last piece of herself that had belonged only to her. A knock at her door made her freeze. It's us, Minho called softly. May we come in? She could say no. She could demand more time. But the contract was clear, and she'd never been one to run from what she'd agreed to. She opened the door. They stood in the hallway in silk pajama pants and nothing else, and the sight of them stole her voice. Beautiful. Dangerous. Hers, even if only for a year. We need to talk about tomorrow, Minho said, and she heard the tension in his voice. He was nervous. They were both nervous. Somehow that made her braver. I know what has to happen. Do you? Sungho asked gently. Because we're not going to hurt you, Nia. This doesn't have to be something you endure. What else would it be? Minho stepped closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. It could be something you enjoy. If you let it. If you trust us. Trust you? A bitter laugh escaped. You bought me. Yes, he agreed. But that doesn't mean we don't care about your pleasure. Your comfort. Your choice in how this happens. His words confused her. Destabilized her. She'd expected them to simply take what the contract entitled them to. Instead they stood before her offering gentleness she didn't know how to accept. I don't understand you, she whispered. We don't fully understand ourselves, Sung-ho admitted. This was supposed to be simple. A business arrangement. But you're not simple, Mia. And what we feel when we look at you isn't business. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What do you feel? Want. Minho's voice dropped to something dark and hungry. Need. Things we shouldn't feel for a woman who's only in our lives temporarily. Then don't. She stepped back, arms wrapping around herself. Protection that was too little, too late. Don't feel anything. Do what the contract requires and nothing more. Is that what you want? Sung-ho challenged. Clinical. Emotionless. Over as quickly as possible? No. God help her, no. She wanted the heat that built in her stomach when they looked at her. The shivers that raced down her spine when Minho's hand grazed her skin. The ache that grew stronger every day, demanding something she'd never experienced. Pleasure. Connection. The dangerous sweetness of being wanted. But admitting that felt like surrender, and she'd surrendered enough. I want to survive this year with my heart intact, she said instead. You told me not to fall in love. I'm trying to protect myself. And if we don't want to be protected from? Minho moved closer until barely a breath separated them. What if we want to fall? You can't, she said desperately. This isn't real. It's a contract. A business arrangement. It ends in 10 months. Does it? His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing her bottom lip. Or does it become whatever we choose to make it? Open your legs, Minho commanded softly as they stood in her doorway, and even though she knew what came next, knew what she'd agreed to, fear and anticipation warred in her chest. We'll make you scream tonight. But only with pleasure, Sung-ho added gently, his hand finding hers. Only if you want this too. Did she want this? She searched herself for the answer and found only truth. Yes. God help her, yes. She wanted their hands on her skin, their mouths tasting hers, the oblivion of pleasure she'd never known. Not because a contract demanded it, but because something in her recognized something in them. Hunger meeting hunger. Loneliness finding its cure. Yes, she breathed. I want this. Then let us in, Minho said, and she stepped back, opening the door wider. Opening herself to whatever came next. They entered her room with reverent slowness, like she was something precious instead of purchased. Minho closed the door softly while Sung-ho approached her, his hand reaching out but not touching. Waiting for permission even now. She took his hand, and the simple contact sparked through her like electricity. We go slow, Sung-ho promised. At any point, you say stop, and we stop. This is about you, Mia. Your pleasure. Your choice. Okay, she whispered, and then there were no more words, only sensation as they worshipped her body with a devotion that shattered every expectation and rebuilt her understanding of what intimacy could be. By the time dawn painted the sky pink, Mia lay between them, boneless and changed. The contract's requirement was fulfilled. The marriage was legal. But something else had happened in that room, something the contract hadn't accounted for. Connection. The dangerous beginnings of feeling. Love waiting in the wings like a storm about to break. The following morning, she woke alone in her bed with the memory of their hands on her skin and fear gripping her heart. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to want more. But God help her, she did. That afternoon, Mia avoided them, staying in her room until hunger forced her out. She found Sung-ho in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled divine, and her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. He glanced up and smiled, and the gentleness in his expression made her chest ache. Hungry? He asked, as if the night before hadn't happened, as if everything between them hadn't shifted irrevocably. Starving, she admitted, sliding onto a bar stool. He plated food without asking what she wanted, somehow knowing her preferences despite the short time they'd spent together. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal after the intimacy they'd shared. She didn't know how to reconcile the man who'd made her scream with pleasure with the man who now carefully arranged vegetables on her plate. You're thinking too hard, he observed, setting the plate before her. I'm thinking exactly the right amount. She picked up her fork, needing something to do with her hands. Last night was a contract obligation. That's all it was. Was it? He leaned against the counter, studying her with those dark eyes that saw too much. Is that all it was for you? No. God, no. It had been revelation and transformation and everything she'd never known she needed. But admitting that gave him power she couldn't afford to surrender. It doesn't matter what it was, she said instead. We had an agreement. We fulfilled it. Now we move forward. Forward, he repeated slowly. As if we can go back to being strangers who happen to share a house. We were never strangers. We're business partners in a mutually beneficial arrangement. That hasn't changed. Everything has changed. Minho's voice came from the doorway, and she jumped, not having heard him approach. He moved like a predator, silent and deadly. You can pretend otherwise, but we all know the truth. What truth? She challenged, even as her heart raced. That you felt it too. The connection. The rightness. He crossed to her, and she fought the urge to retreat. You're ours now, Nia. Not because of a contract. Because you chose to be. One night doesn't make me yours. Doesn't it? His hand came up to tuck a curl behind her ear, the gesture intimate and possessive. Every time you look at us, I see the same hunger we feel. Every time we're in the same room, the air changes. You can deny it, but your body knows the truth. She stood abruptly, needing distance. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're confusing sex with something more. It was physical. Nothing more. Then prove it, Sung-ho said softly. Look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing. She turned to face him, meeting his gaze with all the bravery she could summon. The lie formed on her tongue. I feel nothing. Simple words. Easy words. The words that would protect her heart. But when she looked into his eyes, soft and warm and full of something that looked dangerously like affection, the lie died unspoken. She couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend when her heart was already halfway to falling. I hate you both, she whispered instead, and fled the kitchen like a coward. She spent the rest of the day hiding in the library, buried in a book she couldn't focus on. Her mind kept replaying the night before, the way they'd touched her, the words they'd whispered, the overwhelming sense of being cherished instead of used. It had felt nothing like she'd expected. Nothing like the clinical transaction she'd prepared herself for. It had felt like coming home. By evening, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. How are you, sweetheart? We miss you. Come visit soon. Guilt twisted in her stomach. She'd barely spoken to her family since the wedding, too caught up in her own emotional turmoil to think about them. She typed out a response. I'm fine. I'll try to visit this weekend. Another message arrived, this one from her sister. Mom's treatment is going well. The doctors are optimistic. Thank you for making this possible. I love you. The words made her eyes burn. This was why she'd done it. This was why she'd signed the contract, married strangers, given them access to her body. Because her family needed saving, and she'd been the only one who could do it. Whatever confusion she felt about the twins, whatever dangerous emotions were taking root in her chest, none of it mattered compared to keeping her family safe. She had to remember that. Had to keep perspective. This was temporary. In 10 months, she'd walk away from this house, these men, the person she was becoming in their presence. She couldn't afford to forget that truth. A knock on the library door made her jump. Come in, she called, already knowing who it would be. Minho entered carrying a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Thought you might need this. I don't drink. Tonight you do. He poured without waiting for permission, handed her a glass. You've been hiding all day. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about. He sat across from her, close but not touching. Starting with why you ran this morning. I didn't run. I needed space. You ran, he repeated gently. From us. From what happened. From what you felt. She took a sip of wine, needing the courage it might provide. You want me to admit that last night affected me? Fine. It did. You were gentle and thorough and you made me feel things I've never felt. But that doesn't change anything. This is still a contract with an expiration date. What if it doesn't have to be? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to examine. The contract is clear. 1 year. Then I'm free. Free, he said slowly, tasting the word. Is that what you want? To be free of us? I want to not feel like I'm drowning, she admitted, and the honesty surprised her. I want to not wake up confused about whether you're my husband's or my employer's. I want clarity in a situation that gets more complicated every day. What if complicated is better? He leaned forward, intensity burning in his dark eyes. What if what we're building is worth the confusion? We're not building anything. We're fulfilling contractual obligations. Is that all we did last night? Fulfill obligations? The memory of his hands on her skin, his mouth against hers, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer, flooded through her. It was sex, Minho. Good sex, but still just physical. You're lying. He set down his wine glass with careful precision. To me and to yourself. But I'll play along if that's what you need. We'll pretend last night was purely contractual. We'll pretend the way Sun-ho looks at you doesn't make your pulse race. We'll pretend I don't see the same hunger in your eyes that I feel in my chest. Thank you, she whispered, even though his words felt like knives. He stood to leave, paused at the door. But Nia? One day soon, you're going to stop pretending. And when you do, we'll be waiting. The next few days passed in awkward tension. They were polite at meals, distant in passing, careful not to be alone together. Nia told herself it was better this way. Safer. But she couldn't deny the ache in her chest every time Minho's hand didn't reach for hers, every time Sun-ho's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Friday night brought another gala, this one at a private club that dripped old money and older prejudices. Nia dressed in red, armor disguised as silk, and faced the evening with grim determination. She'd play her role. She'd smile and pretend and let them display her like a trophy. Then she'd return home and continue pretending her heart wasn't breaking. The twins met her at the car looking devastating in black suits, and for a moment, she let herself imagine this was real. That they were her men, proud to have her on their arms, eager to show the world what they'd found. The fantasy lasted until they reached the club and the whispers started. That's her, someone murmured. The American they married for the money. I heard she trapped them with a pregnancy scare. My cousin said she's only after the inheritance. Gold digger through and through. The words landed like blows, each one confirming fears she'd carried since signing the contract. This was how the world saw her. Not as a woman who'd sacrificed for her family, but as an opportunist who'd seduced her way into wealth she didn't deserve. Minho's hand tightened at her waist, his body tensing with barely controlled rage. Ignore them, he murmured in her ear. They're not worth your attention. But she couldn't ignore them. Couldn't stop hearing the judgment, the disgust, the casual cruelty of people who knew nothing about her situation. By the time they'd made it through the receiving line, her face hurt from fake smiling and her chest ached with the effort of not crying. I need air, she whispered to Sun-ho. He guided her to a balcony overlooking the city, his presence a shield against the hostile glances that followed. Once they were alone, she let her smile drop, exhaustion overwhelming her. They hate me, she said flatly. They hate what you represent. Change. Difference. A crack in their perfect world. His hand found hers, squeezed gently. But their opinions don't matter. Don't they? She turned to face him. I'm ruining your reputation. Making you social pariahs. Is the inheritance really worth this? You're not ruining anything. His voice was fierce. They're small-minded bigots who can't handle the fact that we chose someone extraordinary instead of someone they approved of. You didn't choose me. You bought me. I chose to honor the contract, he corrected. But staying interested, wanting more, needing you the way I do? That's choice, Nia. Pure and simple. Before she could respond, angry voices erupted inside. They returned to find Minho facing a group of older Korean men, his body language screaming danger. Say that again, Minho said softly, and the threat in his voice made the hair on her neck rise. I dare you. I said your grandfather would be ashamed, the man repeated, emboldened by alcohol and his friends. Marrying a foreigner for money. Tainting the bloodline. You've made the Kong name a joke. The only joke here is you. Minho stepped closer, and the man actually retreated. My wife is more than you could ever hope to be. And if I hear one more word about her from your mouth or anyone else's, I'll make sure you regret it. You'd threaten me? Over some girl you barely know? She's not some girl. She's my wife. The words came out with absolute finality. And I protect what's mine. The room had gone silent, everyone watching the confrontation. Nia wanted to disappear, to run, to be anywhere but the center of the scene. But Minho found her in the crowd, his eyes locking with hers, and something in his expression rooted her in place. We're leaving, he announced, taking her hand. Anyone who has a problem with my wife can discuss it with my lawyers. They left the gala to scandalized whispers and camera flashes, but Nia barely noticed. She was too focused on the way Minho's hand gripped hers, possessive and protective, like she was something precious worth fighting for. In the car, silence stretched thick and heavy. Finally, Sung-ho spoke. You didn't have to do that. Defend me so publicly. Yes, I did, Minho said simply. You're my wife. That means something. Does it? The question escaped before she could stop it. Or are you just protecting your investment? He turned to her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. If you were just an investment, I would have let them talk. Would have ignored the gossip and focused on business. But you're not an investment, Nia. You're my wife. And I won't tolerate anyone disrespecting what's mine. I'm not yours. The protest was weak, half-hearted, because part of her wanted to be. Wanted to belong to these men who fought for her, protected her, made her feel seen in ways she'd never experienced. Aren't you? Sung-ho challenged. Softly from beside her. Because every time someone threatens you, my first instinct is violence. Every time you smile, I want to be the reason. Every time you're in the same room, I can't focus on anything else. If that's not ownership, what is it? It's called temporary insanity, she shot back, but her voice shook. We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream, Minho said, eyes never leaving hers. I know you read romance novels when you think no one's watching and cry at the endings. I know you call your mother every Tuesday and lie about how happy you are. I know the exact sound you make when you're trying not to cry and the way you bite your lip when you're nervous. Tell me that's not knowing you. The accuracy of his observations shattered something inside her. He'd been watching. Paying attention. Caring in ways she hadn't let herself notice because noticing meant hoping, and hoping was dangerous. That doesn't mean anything, she whispered, but the words lacked conviction. It means everything, Sung-ho corrected. It means you're not just a contract to us anymore, Nia. Maybe you never were. She wanted to argue, to push back, to protect herself from the feelings threatening to consume her. But exhaustion won. She was so tired of fighting. Tired of pretending. Tired of keeping her heart locked away when it wanted nothing more than to surrender. What do you want from me? The question came out raw, vulnerable. The contract says 1 year. Physical consummation. Public appearances. I've given you all of that. What more do you want? Everything, Minho said simply. Your trust. Your affection. Your heart. We want it all. You can't have it, she said desperately. In 10 months, I'm gone. I go back to my life, and you find someone suitable. Someone your family approves of. Someone who fits. What if we don't want someone suitable? Sung-ho's hand found hers in the darkness of the car. What if we just want you? The words hung in the air, heavy with implications that terrified her. She pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. Protection that came too late. When they arrived home, she fled to her room without a word, locking the door like that could somehow keep her heart safe. She heard them pause outside, heard the unspoken question in their silence, but neither knocked. They gave her space she wasn't sure she wanted. That night, she dreamed of their hands on her skin, their voices in her ear, the overwhelming sensation of being claimed. She woke tangled in sheets, aching with need and confusion and a longing that had nothing to do with the contract. The following morning, she found a note slipped under her door. We're giving you time to think. But know this, you're ours in every way that matters. When you're ready to stop running, we'll be here. Minho and Sung-ho. 3 days passed. They didn't push, didn't crowd, gave her the space she demanded. But she felt their eyes on her, tracking her movements through the house. Felt the weight of words unspoken, desires unmet, a connection growing stronger despite her best efforts to starve it. On the 4th day, her mother called with news that stopped her heart. The cancer was back. Aggressive. The doctors were recommending experimental treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. They needed money. More money. How much? Nia asked through numb lips. 200,000. Maybe more depending on how she responds. Her father's voice cracked. We'll figure it out. Sell the house if we have to. No. The word was automatic. Don't do anything. I'll handle it. She hung up and stared at her phone, mind racing. The contract paid her nothing until the year ended. Every penny had gone to clearing their existing debts. She had no savings, no assets, nothing to leverage except the one thing she'd already sold. Her dignity. She found Minho in his office, working through papers with sharp focus. He looked up when she entered, and his expression softened immediately. Nia. What's wrong? I need money. The words tasted like ash. More than the contract specifies. He set down his pen with careful precision. How much? 200,000. My mother's cancer is back. She needs treatment. Done. The word was so simple, so immediate, it took her a moment to process. Done? Just like that? Just like that. He stood, moving around the desk. Your family's medical expenses are covered under the contract's provisions. This qualifies. The contract says existing debts. This is new. I don't care. He stopped in front of her, and she saw something fierce in his eyes. Your mother needs treatment, she gets treatment. Money is not an object. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do this? Because you're my wife, he said simply. And when you hurt, I hurt. That's how this works. Something inside her cracked. The wall she'd built so carefully, the distance she'd maintained so desperately, all of it shattered in the face of his casual generosity. He wasn't doing this for show or for the contract. He was doing it because he cared. I can't pay you back, she whispered. Not unless I extend the contract. I'm not asking you to pay me back. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'm asking you to let me take care of you. Let me be what you need. I don't know how. The admission hurt. I've been taking care of everyone else for so long, I don't know how to be taken care of. Then learn. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself collapse against his chest. Let herself be held. Let herself, for one moment, be weak. We've got you, Nia. Me and Sung-ho. We've got you. She cried then, really cried, all the fear and stress and exhaustion of the past weeks pouring out in ugly, gasping sobs. He held her through it, one hand in her hair, murmuring soft words in Korean she didn't understand but felt in her bones. Comfort. Safety. Home. When the storm passed, she pulled back, embarrassed by her breakdown. I'm sorry. Don't be. He wiped her face with gentle fingers. You're allowed to break sometimes. That's what we're here for. To catch you when you fall. The contract doesn't require this. This level of care. Forget the contract, he said fiercely. This stopped being about a contract the moment we touched you. The moment we learned your laugh and your fears and the way you take up space in our lives like you've always been here. This is about you and us and what we're building despite every logical reason we shouldn't. What are we building? She asked, terrified of the answer. A life, Sung-ho's voice came from the doorway. If you'll let us. She turned to find him watching them with soft eyes, and something in his expression made her heart clench. They looked at her like she mattered. Like she was more than a contract, more than a convenience, more than a mistake they'd made in a moment of necessity. They looked at her like she was loved. I'm scared, she admitted. Terrified, actually. Because in 10 months, this ends. And I don't know how I'm supposed to walk away from this. From you. Then don't, Minho said simply. Stay. Make this real. Choose us the way we're choosing you. It's not that simple. Why not? Sung-ho moved into the room, completing the triangle. We're both adults. We're legally married. We're attracted to each other. We enjoy each other's company. Why can't this be real? Because real requires love, she said. And love requires time. And we're running out of both. So we make more time, Minho said. We extend the contract. We renegotiate terms. Whatever it takes. You'd want that? To keep me longer? We'd want that forever, Sung-ho corrected softly. If you'd have us. Forever. The word echoed in her head, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Could she do that? Could she let herself believe this was more than temporary? That these men who'd bought her contract had somehow bought her heart too? I need time, she whispered. To think. To process. Take all the time you need, Minho said, though she heard the tension in his voice. But Nia? While you're thinking, remember this. We're not going anywhere. Whether it's 10 months or 10 years, you're ours. And we're yours. That doesn't change. She left them standing in the office, their words chasing her down the hall. Forever. Choose us. Make this real. Dangerous words. Seductive words. Words that made her want things she'd promised herself she wouldn't. That evening, she called her mother to tell her the treatment was covered. Heard the relief and joy in her mother's voice, the tears of gratitude that made her own eyes burn. This was why she'd done it. This was why it had all been worth it. But somewhere along the way, the why had shifted. It wasn't just about saving her family anymore. It was about building something new with two men who'd seen her at her worst and somehow still wanted her at her best. A week later, her mother's treatment began, and Nia threw herself into supporting her family while trying to ignore the growing tension in her own life. The twins gave her space, but their presence was constant. Minho's hand at her back during dinners. Sung-ho's soft smiles across rooms. Small touches that said we're here without demanding anything in return. She was falling. Slowly, terrifyingly, irrevocably falling in love with two men who'd bought her like property but treated her like a queen. 1 month became 2, then 3. Summer melted into fall, and with it came a new normal. Date nights that weren't quite dates. Lazy Sunday mornings in the kitchen. Movies on the couch with her tucked between them. It felt like a relationship. Like love. Like everything she'd never known she wanted. But the contract loomed, a countdown clock to the moment she'd have to choose. Stay or go. Love or safety. Risk everything or walk away with her heart intact. The decision should have been simple. But nothing about this situation had ever been simple. By the time winter approached, bringing their 6-month anniversary, Nia knew the truth. She loved them. Both of them. Deeply, completely, terrifyingly. The kind of love that made her want to stay forever, contract be damned. But she was afraid.